Hello, dear listeners. Let's get to it. So here's my inspiration for today's episode. I was on a video call with a client and I asked the question, "How are you doing?" Now, this is a small question, but I'm asking the question with real openness to whatever the answer might be. And I just check in for a moment. When you ask that question, are you expecting a fine answer? So just that's part of this work is being open to whatever the answer might be. And the answer I got was, Sharon, what's the opposite of centered? And I thought, this is a good question. What is the opposite of centered? Is it off center? Is it flat out? Untethered? The topic of last week's episode, adrift? Whatever the opposite of center is, we know it's not a great feeling, and we're also familiar with it. So here's what I want to do in today's episode is gift you some ways to bring yourself and the people around you back to center. So that's what we're working on together. Um, Here's the move that we're going to make. We're going to look first at the case for centering. So my centering skeptics, I've got you. We're going to talk about why this matters. And I want to admit, I'm a person who was telling coaching clients and teams that I work with the power of things like meditation for years before I myself had any kind of practice around it. And I am still very much building a practice versus someone who considers herself an expert on the practice. Right. I'm here with you. I know that these things can feel like a stretch. So we're going to talk about why this matters because it does. And then we're going to look at building a toolkit. So we're going to look at a toolkit for yourself. So I think of these as the quick and easy things that you can do to center in the moment. You feel like you're going to fly off the handle and yell, throw something. Instead, center. How do you do that? So, toolkit for what to do in the moment when you need to bring yourself back to center. Then we're also going to highlight what are practices that you can tap into and begin to have a sustained way to build up your resilience or stamina of staying in center, even when inevitably there will be circumstances that knock you off center. So, how do you have practices to build up your stamina to stay there? And then finally, we will look at practices that you can do in a team setting. So, just a couple of things that, and that team setting might be around the dinner table with your family. It might be around the boardroom with your leadership team. It might be on a video call where you're all in lots of tiny boxes. You can do this in all of these settings. So, these are practices that you can try out there. That's what we're after. Okay. So let's talk about the case for why does this matter? Like why bother centering? In a pre-pandemic era, I was frequently coaching, I called them men who threw things. So I was brought in not as a out counseling coach, hey, we got to get rid of these people, but these were um, leaders, male leaders who had achieved a high level of success, were really able to get the job done, but were having real issues. So when I say they threw things, I mean they literally threw things. Now, you are probably forming an assessment or a judgment about these men, and it's probably not a great one. I think one of my superpowers is that I have deep levels of empathy so that when I see behaviors like that, I don't think that's a bad person. I think that's a really bad behavior. And how do we get to the root of that and bring empathy to create a change? So, um, when I think about somebody who is throwing things, yelling things, the cost for that is very high. It is toxic to work around those people. It is counterproductive to the rest of the good things that they're doing when those behaviors are showing up. And those behaviors are an example of somebody way off center. I mean, you might call me Pollyanna-ish, but I really believe in my heart that people don't move through the world wanting to yell at you and throw things. There's reasons that show up that have led them to that place. So why does this matter? Well, one, why does it matter to find center? We want to eliminate that people are operating this way. When we operate from a place of center, there's a lot of good things that follow. For example, we have reduced levels of stress. That means we also have increased ability to focus. We have improved decision making. So we're able to move more efficiently and smartly through our jobs and our lives. We also know that we're operating in a time of where we have a lot of mental health crises happening. On a intuitive level, I don't think we have the wisdom yet. I don't think our wisdom has caught up to the feeling of what we're processing of having experienced 2020 and then again 2021. And here we are in 2022 saying, well, like the pandemic is mostly over. It's kind of over. We've returned to work. What does it mean? We're still figuring it out. And that's okay. I mean, I think the one of the gifts in all of this is that we are figuring it out together because we were having a shared, albeit terrible, but a shared experience, which gave us a way of talking about things that had been underneath the surface. So this is good. On the flip side, there's a lot of mental health crises that are happening. And so we're seeing our workplaces respond with things like flexible work schedules, 4-day work weeks, integrating even mental health days, adding increased counseling benefits as part of the services offered. So there are resources at a higher level, which is good and necessary. And those are systemic. So what matters about being able to find center is like little practices that take us back there on a regular basis. How can we come back to center when we're knocked off in the moment? And how are we building our stamina over time with the hope that it's going to help us? I don't mean solving something like a clinical depression. Like that is a real illness and needs to be addressed. What I'm talking about is when we're having a bad day and we're having a series of bad days, when we're in the momentum of a bad day, how do we break that cycle? So this is why it matters. Yes, there's the benefits of how we do our jobs better. There's the ethical benefit of for ourselves and those around us taking care of ourselves. So let's talk about how we do it. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is the toolkit, right? Practical, simple, quick things that you can do to bring yourself back to center. I suspect as I tell you these things that you're not going to be like, ooh, never heard of that before. I'm also going to challenge you because I bet even though you've heard of them before, you're probably not doing it on a regular basis. And by the way, if you're like, well, I think maybe I'm doing it, but let me tell you about all the people who aren't doing it around me. Come to yourself first. Model for yourself first. We'll talk about how you can model this and practice this in a group setting, but start with yourself. So, first thing, breathe, baby. You got to breathe. And I love breathing as a way to come back to center because turns out we're all doing it. So you're breathing whether you're doing it in a way that centers or not. So let's practice. Whether you are driving in the car or doing dishes or picking up your room, those are some of the things I'm often doing when I'm listening to a podcast. Brushing your teeth, that's another one. So wherever you are, I want you to just take at your own pace a deep cleansing breath. And as you do it, I want you to invite yourself to come back to center. And I'm going to practice this. Okay. Okay. There's my cleansing, like quick breath. Now I'm going to take a breath in, maybe hold it, and then let it out. Now, some things that I notice happen for me as I take that deep centering breath, my shoulders drop a little lower. I feel both lighter, but also more grounded, like my feet are deeper into the floor beneath me. I also find that when I take a deep centering breath, it helps if I take myself to physical center. So that's my toolkit item number 2, physically center yourself. Now, if you move and take yourself, like move those shoulders around, I'm doing it as I'm saying this, like move your shoulders, take yourself off center. And remember, that's both left to right, but also in your depth, like forwards and backwards. Move yourself off center and then take yourself back to center. It helps to practice this when you are standing and also when you're sitting, right? We have different points of centering depending on the position we're in, but find your physical center. And then you can try doing these two things together at physical center. Take a deep cleansing breath in. We're breathing in and letting out. Okay, so toolkit number 1, do your deep breath. Toolkit item number 2, take yourself to physical center. All right, number 3, I want you to move. Now this can be if you notice that you're off center. So I'm getting triggered. You might notice you're off center. I'm getting hot. I'm frustrated. Um, you can move. That means you can literally get up and whether you are working from home or you're in an office setting or next to your child who's still not tying their shoes before they go to school, whatever that triggering moment is, you can move. You stand up, you walk, take a loop around the room, take a loop around the office floor, take a walk around the block if you've got the time for that. Move. So I'm not talking here about you have a ritual of exercising every morning. I'm talking about I am feeling frustrated. Let me physically move my body. You could even like do jumping jacks, right? Like I don't care. You could take the jump rope out. You could ride a bike around the block. Whatever feels accessible to you in the moment, but the point is I want you to physically move yourself. And then ask yourself, okay, as I move myself, can I come back to center? And sometimes the answer is no, but you've removed yourself from the situation. I can't center, so I've moved. Sometimes just simply the act of moving brings us back. Okay, so you can move. Next up, laugh. Now, I have to say, I'm proud of myself that I have added this to the list because this does not come easily to me. I'm smiling as I say this, but I know of myself that when I have been in office cultures where they're like, what can we do to bring more fun? And I'm even as I say it, I'm like, do I sound really judgmental? Let me try it again. What can we do to bring fun into our workplaces? This is really important. We need to have joy and to laugh. And it's a way that we can bring ourselves back. Like we're so focused. We're in a working session. We're working against a deadline independently and it's so intense. Lighten up. Like look at the GIF. Uh, read the joke book that's lying, if you're in my case, lying on the coffee table from one of your kids, and find ways to laugh. It really does loosen things up and allow us to shake from the intensity of the moment and come back to center so we can laugh. It's a nice practice to have also in a team, which we'll get to. So find ways to laugh. Next up, connect. This might be phoning a friend. It might be reading something to yourself. So you're connecting to yourself. So you can connect with others. You can connect to yourself, but like find a way of where you feel connection. You might just ask yourself in this moment, what would spark connection? Oftentimes it's reaching out to somebody else. So we're so off center. It might be about asking for help. It might be about asking for perspective. It might be just about enjoying tea and doing nothing else, like just being with somebody. So this is a way that we can connect. I think here of just this last week, I've had a great moment here in my work studio, which is not usually where I spend my evenings. I'm usually back with my family at home. But I had a really good friend who was under an intense deadline in a school program, and we got together to gain perspective. Yes, for her in this thing that she was working on to produce for school, but also for me. Like it's been an intense period of time in my work and at home, and so just for both of us, it was this chance to sip some delicious orange wine and be connected. Yes, we talked and gained perspective about things we're working on, but we also were just enjoying each other's company. Like that's center. Like I'm back there. A little more it takes a little more time and planning than just taking a breath, but also still quick. Wasn't something, we didn't have to plan a whole event. It was just, hey, want to get together this week? Hey, how about this day? Hey, the time we planned needs to change. Fine, we can rejigger the plan. But coming back to center through connection. So, what would give you a way to connect to yourself, to others, to come back to center? And finally, whether it is as you set out in your day, at the beginning of a meeting, maybe you're doing something that makes you feel intimidated, you can set an intention. Just simply the act of setting an intention can shift things up. One of the things that I do before I work with any of my coaching clients is as I'm stepping into a coaching conversation, I set an intention for that conversation. Now, I'm still going to ask the client, what do you want to focus on? Or maybe we have a set agenda we've already prepped. I know we've planned, we've intended to focus on this. And still, what do you want to focus on? Does that still feel on point? At the same time, as I track with clients, I'm seeing where I think we can go. You can probably imagine with your families, you're like, I see where we could go as a family. With your teams, I see what's possible for this direct report for our entire group. When you see what's possible, which is part of what I'm looking at as a coach, then you can simply set the intention if they want to go there, I'm willing to go there. If they I want to bring this spirit to the conversation. And so just by setting an intention, you bring yourself back to like, this is what's important in this moment. And it might be for yourself, right? So I'm talking about with others, which is kind of once you bring in others into the mix, it's always 2.0. Like so if you're back to 1.0 for yourself, it might be I'm reflecting that I've had a week that it has been very intensive. And as I set out in my day, maybe I didn't hit it right when I first woke up, but at some point I've drawn my attention to the fact that, okay, I want to set the intention. One, like high five, I did it. Great. Now my intention is to bring more rest to my day or to invite more ease into my day. Something like that. You're setting an intention. Okay. So that's the toolkit of things that you can do for yourself. By the way, show notes, pointroadstudios.com. I'll have this list there in case you're wanting to come back to it. That's always the case. So you can trust when there's tools and tips, things like that, links to articles, you'll find them over there, pointroadstudios.com. So that in recap, your toolkit of quick and easy things you can do for yourself, breathe, physically take yourself to center, move, laugh, connect, and set an intention. Are there more ways? Always, but we'll leave it at that. We'll call that good enough for today. Now let's talk about practices, things that you can do to sustain the way that you are, that you're in building the stamina for this work, and so that it's not as easy for you to get knocked off center. So this is less about, okay, I got triggered in the moment, now what? But that when you're triggered in the moment, you're less likely to be knocked off center. So here are some resources for that. The first is the foundation of what I call fit to lead. And again, I am a trained listener. Have tracked with a lot of information and knowledge about teams and leadership development, organizational design. I am not an expert on nutrition and sleep and bio fill in the blank. Yet I can tell you that to be fit to lead, we must sleep, eat well, so fuel our body, and move, like physically get exercise. So those three practices are the foundation of anything else that you're doing. If you are sleep deprived, if you are like sustaining yourself on processed foods, and if you are sedentary, you know the cost of that. So those things really matter. Um, in my own life, the way I have had, I have three children, and they're the oldest just turned 10, which is very exciting. The youngest just started kindergarten, so it's a real moment in my parenting life. I'm out of what I would call the survival years, where it was like literally, if I close my eyes, someone might not be living. Like you can't touch that. You might drown. Like the stakes really were life and death. And so like there's a real kind of attention that's needed during that time. And I have to say that that those foundational elements that I'm talking about, eating food that fuels me, sleeping and moving, have been under a lot of changes during the last decade of my life. But the thing that I'm doing now is paying attention to more of the data around it. So I have an Aura ring and I use that. It helps me to see how I'm sleeping, in particular, like to see some of the rhythms around that. Wherever you are, just finding like, check in. How am I doing against those three things? And are there small tweaks that I can make today? That's always what I'm looking for. Of course, we know like we want to have everything perfect and wonderful. But what's like one thing you could do right away, and do that? And let success beget success and keep going. But that's like the starting point for me on practices that are going to help you find center. And then I'm going to give you three others that kind of sit in the domain of um, building up your stamina to stay at center through sustained focus, quiet, clearing of the clutter that exists within our bodies, our minds. And so that for me is meditation. I am a person who really appreciates a guided meditation. I might use Insight Timer as an app. I've done Headspace before. There are others. If you've got one you love, please reach out, contact me. I would love to hear what meditation resources you are using that work well. But creating a practice of meditating is really powerful. One of the things that's great about meditation is it takes us out of our thought habits. So when we are in meditation, guided meditation, we're not speaking, writing, where we're tapping into the neuro pathways that already exist. So it creates openness to developing new ones. This is a beautiful thing for us. So meditation. Next up is a flavor of meditation, stillness. So building a practice of stillness. I think of a woman who was in a group facilitation that I was hosting this month. And she said, one of the things I've been doing to help me with all the mental loads I'm carrying is just sitting outside on my porch for 5 minutes and doing nothing else. The phone doesn't come with me. The kids don't come with me. The laptop doesn't come with me. Also, the music doesn't come with me, like things that might be considered fun. It's just I'm sitting there and doing nothing else but being still. And so finding ways to cultivate stillness. You might call that meditation, but I think it's another flavor of just being and not doing. And if 5 minutes feels overwhelming, can you do it for 10 seconds? Can you work your way up to 30 seconds? So practicing stillness. And the final way I wanted to talk about a practice that you can develop for yourself to help you come back to center is journaling. And there's a lot of flavors for this. There's gratitude journals. There's, writing down what I did that day. Um, I like to journal through putting down bullets, like just quick there. And there's the whole, and I don't mean a bullet journal. I know that's a whole thing that My higher self tells me I'm very interested in, but my on the ground self is like, I don't know. There's a lot of things I have to learn to be able to do this that I'm not there yet. So I don't really care what it looks like. It can be I post something on Instagram every day that feels meaningful to me. In short, you can journal in a lot of ways. It can be in words, it can be in pictures, but what you're doing is capturing, writing down, or drawing down something that takes what's inside of you and puts it outside of you. And so, like, that's what I mean by journaling. And if we're doing that in a different way than the decluttering that happens when we get still or when we meditate, we're releasing things and we're also gaining perspective on them as we release them, which is cool. So, those are the practices in sum, the big three: sleep, eat well, move, exercise. And then also practices like meditating, stillness, journaling. Those are ways that you can sustain your ability to be at center. And then you've got all those toolkits, breathing, laughing, connecting, etc., to take you back when you are knocked off center, which again is going to happen. I hope you don't find yourself throwing things or yelling at people. But also if you do, I get it. I have to say, like, as a parent, probably one of the things that I'm practicing most is not yelling like that. So just in case you're like, ooh, people that throw things, people that yell at people, like I'm one of those people. I yell at people I love and I don't like it about myself. But by practicing coming back to center, it really helps. And also saying I'm sorry and also setting an intention that I don't want to be a parent who yells. Okay, so that's real. Speaking of families, let's talk about team practices. So I want to just give you a few. So the first is we talked about this as a tool for yourself. This is also a tool for your team to set an intention individually and collectively. So it might be, I'm going to use the example of my family. It might be setting an intention in your morning routines. So I have to admit, we're not doing this in this school year. Maybe we'll bring it back. But last school year, not perfect, not every day, but most days, many days, as a family sitting around our kitchen island, I would prompt and ask, "What's your intention for the day?" Here's my intention for the day. So it wasn't, in this instance, it wasn't a collective intention as a family, but it was the creating space for everyone to share their intention. In a team meeting, let's say you're about to do a big working session on a strategy in a team meeting, you can do the same thing. Here's our intention. Here's how we're going to move through as a team as we work on this topic. Maybe even then, like bonus, each person can say, here's how I want to contribute to that intention. But you're creating space to say, let's invite our intentions in, which is a way of making what sits within us external, which is important because we're not mind readers. So we're making that transparent. Second, make centering a part of the way you work when you are teaming, when you are working together as a team. And a simple way that you can do this is put it on your agenda. The first thing, or maybe the first thing we do is we review our agenda. And then the second thing we do is we center. And that can be we read a poem. That can be we take a breath. That can be we find a way to connect on something. Go back to that other toolkit for self. All those things you can find ways to cascade out for your team. So make it a part of the agenda, make it a part of the way that you work. Another way that you can do this is have a rotating role of who's going to own centering. So get everyone in the practice of it. Like that's important. And make it part of the way that you work. The same way someone owns the agenda, I hope. Otherwise, I know that meeting is having having a rough go of it. We have other roles that we play. Can we have a centering role? I think I'm going to leave it at that. Set an intention, make centering a part of the way that you do things, whether through part of the agenda, rotating role, all like little practices for how you can bring this in to the way you work the way you team. And with that, dear listeners, that is really the headlines of what I wanted to share. I am hoping, wishing that you are finding yourself at center. If you are not, I am hoping, wishing that these tools and practices will help you to be in a committed practice of getting yourself there. And remember, it's never an achievement. It's always a practice. And so it's okay and in fact necessary that you're learning. And I will be here to learn alongside you. Please know that if I can personally be of help, I want to be that help for you. So whether it is, but how can I build more centering into my team? How can I find a way to clear the clutter and bring myself back to center? If you think coaching might help, if you want to be in a conversation of what this can look like, please be in touch. You can contact me through pointroadstudios.com. You can find me on LinkedIn. Let's be in touch. Let's talk. And if where you're connecting with me is right here on the podcast, that is also great. So know that I will be cheering for you, wishing in you, believing in you, and holding my personal, deeply held conviction that there is nothing stopping you. So go on ahead and get after whatever it is that you really want.